Prince Alexander stood at the grand window of Buckingham Palace, watching the morning crowds gather below. At 22 years old, he had grown accustomed to the constant presence of people hoping to catch a glimpse of royalty. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the courtyard as tourists pressed against the iron gates, cameras ready. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell adjusted her earpiece and scanned the crowd through her binoculars. As head of the Royal Protection Unit, she had learned to read people like books. Today felt different somehow. There was an electricity in the air that made her instincts prickle. The prince had received another threatening letter that morning. The fourth one in 2 weeks. Each message grew more specific, more personal. Someone knew his daily routines, his favorite walking paths through the palace gardens, even his preferred coffee shop in nearby Westminster. "Your Royal Highness," came the voice of Commander James Whitfield, the prince's personal security detail leader. "We've reviewed the morning schedule. Perhaps we should consider postponing your public appearance at the charity event." Alexander turned from the window, his jaw set with determination. "Commander, I've been preparing for this speech for weeks. The Children's Hospital Foundation is counting on this fundraiser. I won't let some coward with a pen frighten me into hiding." The threatening letters had begun appearing after the prince announced his engagement to Isabella Chen, a brilliant pediatric surgeon from a middle-class family. The messages contained racist slurs and detailed descriptions of what the writer planned to do to prevent the upcoming royal wedding. Detective Mitchell entered the room, her expression grave. "Sir, we've analyzed the latest letter. The paper matches stationery from the Royal Westminster Hotel. The handwriting analysis suggests our suspect is educated, possibly upper class. The ink contains trace minerals that suggest the writer lives or works in the Kensington area." Prince Alexander studied the protective details surrounding him. These were good people, dedicated professionals who had sworn to protect him with their lives. He thought of Isabella, currently performing surgery at Great Ormond Street Hospital, completely unaware of the morning's developments. "What's the crowd situation looking like?" he asked. Commander Whitfield consulted his tablet. "Approximately 300 people have gathered for your departure. Standard enthusiastic crowd, mostly families with children wanting photographs. Our advance team has cleared the immediate perimeter twice." The prince nodded, but something nagged at him. During his years of public appearances, he had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense trouble. Today, that feeling was stronger than ever. Detective Mitchell's radio crackled to life. "Control to MIT-1, we have a problem. Hotel security just reported a guest matching our suspect profile checked out early this morning. Room was paid for with cash. Fake identification used." The prince watched as his security team exchanged worried glances. Outside, the crowd was growing larger and more restless. Children held handmade signs with messages of support for his upcoming wedding. Elderly tourists clutched Union Jack flags hoping for a royal wave. "Sir, we strongly recommend postponing," Commander Whitfield said firmly. Alexander shook his head. "These people have been waiting in the cold for hours. Many of them have traveled from far away just to see us leave for the charity event. I won't disappoint them because of some anonymous threats." He moved toward the door, but Detective Mitchell stepped forward. "Your Highness, if our suspect is here today, he's planned this carefully. The threatening letters were designed to make us predictable, to force us into specific security patterns he could study and exploit." The prince paused. He hadn't considered that possibility. "What do you mean?" "Think about it, sir. Each letter referenced specific details about your routine, your preferences, your schedule. By threatening you, he forced us to increase visible security measures. He's been watching our response, learning our procedures." Commander Whitfield pulled up security camera footage on his tablet. "She's right, sir. Look at this. Same individual. Appears in background footage from 3 of your recent public appearances. Different clothes, different position in the crowd, but same facial structure." The prince studied the grainy images. A man in his 40s. Average height, unremarkable appearance. The kind of person who could blend into any crowd without attracting attention. He's been studying us, Alexander realized. Learning our patterns, our weaknesses. Detective Mitchell nodded grimly. And today might be the day he makes his move. Outside, the crowd grew more excited as royal staff began preparing for the prince's departure. Children pressed closer to the gates, their parents lifting them onto shoulders for better views. Tour guides spoke excitedly in multiple languages, explaining the significance of witnessing a royal departure. Prince Alexander felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. These were his people, citizens who supported the monarchy and looked to the royal family for stability and continuity. Yet among them might be someone who wished him harm. "What are our options?" he asked. Commander Whitfield outlined 3 possibilities: complete cancellation, departure through a secure rear exit, avoiding the crowd entirely, or proceeding as planned with maximum security presence. "The third option puts you at greatest risk," Detective Mitchell warned, "but it also gives us the best chance of identifying and apprehending our suspect if he's here." The prince considered this. His entire life had been about duty, service, and obligation to his people. Running away now would set a precedent he wasn't comfortable with. If we proceed as planned, what additional measures can we implement? Plainclothes, officers throughout the crowd, snipers positioned on surrounding buildings, multiple exit routes prepared, Commander Whitfield replied. "But sir, even with all these precautions, there's still significant risk." Alexander looked out the window again. An elderly woman in a wheelchair had positioned herself near the front of the crowd, a small British flag clutched in her arthritic hands. A young father held his daughter on his shoulders, pointing excitedly toward the palace entrance. "These people believe in something bigger than themselves," he said quietly. "They believe in the institution I represent, in the continuity and stability the monarchy provides. If I hide from every threat, what message does that send?" Detective Mitchell understood his reasoning, but her job was to keep him alive. "Sir, believing in something is admirable. Being dead for it helps no one." The prince smiled grimly. "Then we better make sure that doesn't happen." He turned to face his security team. "We proceed as planned, but with your enhanced measures. And I want everyone to understand something. If our suspect is out there today, he's made this personal by threatening not just me, but Isabella and everything we represent. Today, we end this." Detective Mitchell positioned herself among the crowd 40 minutes before the prince's scheduled departure. Dressed in casual clothes with a tourist guidebook, she blended seamlessly with the excited onlookers. Her earpiece remained hidden beneath her carefully styled hair. The morning had turned crisp and bright, perfect weather for a royal appearance. Families continued arriving, many having traveled from distant towns hoping to catch a glimpse of the popular young prince. Street vendors sold commemorative flags and postcards nearby, their cheerful calls adding to the festive atmosphere. Through her concealed microphone, Mitchell reported her observations. "Crowd appears normal, mostly families, elderly tourists, young couples. No obvious suspicious behavior detected." She paused, scanning faces carefully. "Wait. Male, approximately 45 years old, dark coat, positioning himself near the eastern gate. Matches general description from hotel footage." Commander Whitfield's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Visual confirmation needed. Can you get closer?" Mitchell began moving through the crowd, using the natural flow of people to mask her approach. The suspect stood slightly apart from others, his attention focused not on the palace entrance where the prince would appear, but on the security arrangements surrounding the area. "Suspicious individual is studying our security positions," she whispered. "He's not here for a royal sighting. His focus is entirely on our personnel placement." Inside the palace, Prince Alexander was receiving final security briefings. "Commander," Whitfield outlined the positioning of their teams. 12 plainclothes officers scattered throughout the crowd, 4 snipers on surrounding buildings, and a secondary motorcade ready for emergency evacuation. "Sir, we've identified a potential suspect matching our profile. Detective Mitchell is conducting close surveillance now." The prince nodded, adjusting his tie. Today's charity event would raise crucial funds for the Children's Hospital Foundation, an organization close to his heart, since his younger sister had been treated there years ago for a serious illness. "What's Isabella's status?" he asked, referring to his fiancée. Dr. Chen is safely at the hospital, completing her morning surgeries. Extra security has been placed around the medical facility as a precaution. Outside, Detective Mitchell continued her careful observation. The suspect had moved positions twice, each time selecting vantage points that offered clear sight lines to the palace entrance, while remaining partially concealed behind other crowd members. Target is demonstrating tactical awareness, she reported. He's avoiding security cameras and maintaining multiple escape routes. This isn't amateur hour. The crowd grew more excited as royal staff began final preparations for the prince's departure. Children pressed against the iron barriers, their faces bright with anticipation. Tour guides gathered their groups, cameras were readied, and the general buzz of conversation increased. Mitchell noticed something that made her blood run cold. The suspect was wearing a large, heavy coat despite the mild weather. His right hand remained consistently buried in the coat pocket, and he stood with his weight positioned forward, ready for quick movement. "Commander, we have a serious problem," she whispered urgently. Suspect appears to be armed. Right hand concealed in coat pocket, classic pre-attack positioning. He's preparing for something. Inside the palace, Commander Whitfield's expression hardened. "All units, code yellow. Potential weapon identified in crowd. Maintain positions but prepare for escalation." Prince Alexander overheard the radio traffic. "Commander, what's happening?" "Sir, Detective Mitchell has identified suspicious behavior, consistent with an armed individual. We need to abort the public appearance." The prince moved to the window, looking down at the crowd of loyal subjects who had waited hours in the cold just to see him. "How certain are we?" "Certain enough that I won't risk your life, sir." But Alexander was studying the crowd with trained eyes. Years of public appearances had taught him to read group dynamics, to sense the mood and energy of gatherings. Something felt wrong, but not in the way his security team believed. "Commander, I need Detective Mitchell to describe exactly what she's seeing." Whitfield patched through Mitchell's audio feed. Her voice came through clearly. "Suspect male, dark coat, positioned near eastern gate. Right hand concealed in pocket. Forward stance, tactical positioning. Classic pre-attack behavior patterns." Prince Alexander frowned. Something about the description nagged at him, but he couldn't identify what. "Mitchell, can you see his face clearly?" "Negative, sir. He's positioned to avoid direct camera angles and maintain partial concealment." The prince made a decision that would surprise everyone. "I'm going to the window where the crowd can see me." "Sir, absolutely not," Commander Whitfield protested. If there's an armed suspect, he'll reveal himself when he sees me." Alexander interrupted. "And you'll have a clear shot." Before anyone could stop him, the prince moved to the large window overlooking the courtyard and stepped into full view of the crowd below. The reaction was immediate and electric. Hundreds of people began cheering, waving flags, and pointing excitedly. Children jumped up and down. Elderly tourists clutched their hearts with joy, and cameras flashed like strobe lights. Detective Mitchell watched the suspect's reaction carefully. The moment Prince Alexander appeared at the window, the man's posture changed dramatically. His concealed hand moved inside his coat, his stance shifted, and he began scanning the area with obvious urgency. "Target is reacting to the prince's appearance," Mitchell reported. "Hand movement in coat, increased agitation, searching behavior." But then something unexpected happened. Instead of focusing on the prince at the window, the suspect began looking around the crowd frantically, as if searching for someone specific among the hundreds of faces. Mitchell realized with growing confusion that the man wasn't preparing to attack the prince. He was looking for someone else entirely. "Commander, I need backup units to converge on the eastern gate area," she said. "But I'm not certain this individual's target is the prince." At that moment, the suspect's searching gaze locked onto something across the crowd. Mitchell followed his sightline and saw a second man, also in dark clothing, positioning himself near the western gate, with his hand similarly concealed. "Multiple suspects," Mitchell shouted into her microphone. "Two armed individuals. Coordinated positioning, eastern and western gates." The crowd continued their joyful celebration, completely unaware that two potentially dangerous individuals had positioned themselves for what appeared to be a coordinated attack on their beloved prince. Prince Alexander, still visible at the window began to sense the growing tension among his security detail. Through the glass, he could see Detective Mitchell moving urgently through the crowd, speaking rapidly into her concealed microphone. Then he noticed something that made his heart race. A third individual, this one a woman, was moving through the crowd toward the main entrance. Unlike the tourists around her, she wasn't looking up at the prince. Her attention was focused entirely on something at ground level. The prince realized with crystal clarity that his security team was tracking the wrong threat. Whatever was happening down there, it was bigger and more complex than a single assassin with a grudge against the royal wedding. Prince Alexander's mind raced as he watched the unfolding situation from his window perch. 3 suspicious individuals, coordinated positioning, and a crowd of innocent civilians caught in the middle. His security training, though limited compared to his protectors, had taught him to recognize tactical patterns. "Commander," he said calmly into his microphone, "I believe we're dealing with a coordinated team, not a lone assassin." Below, Detective Mitchell had reached the same conclusion. The woman moving through the crowd carried herself with military precision, her movements too controlled and purposeful for a casual tourist. More troubling, she was heading directly toward a group of school children who had positioned themselves near the main gates. "Control. I have eyes on a third suspect, female, approximately 35 years old, moving toward the children's group near main entrance," Mitchell reported. "This is looking like a coordinated operation." Commander Whitfield's voice came through all security channels. "All units, we have multiple suspects in coordinated positions. Repeat, this is not a lone wolf situation. Snipers, maintain overwatch but do not engage without clear hostile action." The prince stepped back from the window, his mind working furiously. Something about the whole scenario felt choreographed, but not in the way anyone expected. Years of studying history and military strategy had given him insight into how real attacks unfolded, and this didn't match any pattern he recognized. "Commander, has anyone considered that we might be looking at this wrong?" "What do you mean, sir?" Alexander moved to a different window, one that offered a broader view of the surrounding streets. "What if the threatening letters weren't meant to target me directly? What if they were meant to flush out someone else?" Detective Mitchell, still moving through the crowd, suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. The female suspect had pulled out her phone and was speaking rapidly to someone. At the exact same moment, both male suspects also produced phones and began urgent conversations. "All 3 suspects are now on mobile phones," she reported. "This is definitely coordinated." But then Mitchell noticed something that changed everything. The female suspect wasn't talking into her phone. She was listening intently while scanning the crowd with obvious concern. Her body language suggested she was receiving urgent information, not giving orders. "Wait," Mitchell spoke into her microphone. "Something's not right here." The female suspect suddenly broke into a run, pushing through the crowd toward one of the male suspects near the eastern gate. Her movement wasn't aggressive, it was protective, like someone trying to prevent disaster rather than cause it. Prince Alexander watched this development with growing understanding. "Commander, I think our suspects are trying to stop something, not start it." "Sir, that doesn't make sense given the threatening letters." "The letters were bait," Alexander interrupted. "Someone wanted to draw these people out into the open." Detective Mitchell reached the eastern gate area just as the female suspect intercepted the first male. She could hear fragments of their urgent conversation. "Abort immediately. Police everywhere. He knows we're here." The second male suspect, positioned near the western gate, was backing away from the crowd while speaking rapidly into his phone. His concealed hand wasn't gripping a weapon. He was holding a radio device of some kind. Mitchell's training kicked in as she realized the true situation. These weren't attackers. They were some kind of security team themselves, but whose? "Commander, I need immediate background checks on all hotel guests from the past week who paid with cash. Cross-reference with international security agencies." Detective, what are you thinking? "I think our suspects are foreign security operatives, possibly here to protect someone in this crowd." Prince Alexander, still observing from above, noticed additional details his ground-level security couldn't see. A black sedan with diplomatic plates was parked 3 blocks away, engine running. Two more individuals in dark clothing were positioned on rooftops across from the palace, but their attention wasn't focused on him. "Commander, check the diplomatic registry. I think we have international protection details operating on British soil without proper coordination." The crowd below continued their joyful celebration, completely oblivious to the complex security operation unfolding around them. Children held up their handmade signs, elderly tourists waved flags, and tour guides maintained their enthusiastic commentary. But Detective Mitchell had identified the real source of danger. A fourth individual, this one matching the description from the threatening letters exactly, was moving through the crowd with obvious hostile intent. Unlike the other, three suspects, this person's movements were predatory and focused entirely on the palace entrance where the prince would soon appear. "True target identified," Mitchell spoke urgently into her microphone. "Male, approximately 45, dark hair, carrying what appears to be a concealed weapon. This is our letter writer." The three foreign operatives had also spotted the real threat. The female agent was moving to intercept from the south while the two males converged from east and west positions. Their coordination was flawless, suggesting elite training. "Commander, the foreign security team is moving to neutralize the actual threat," Mitchell reported. "But if they engage on British soil without authorization, we could have a diplomatic incident." Prince Alexander made a decision that would surprise everyone. He stepped back to the window where the crowd could see him and began what appeared to be casual waving and acknowledgement of the crowd's cheers. But his movements were deliberate and coded. 3 waves to the left, then 2 to the right, then a specific gesture with his right hand. To the crowd, it looked like typical royal acknowledgement. To trained security personnel, it was a clear message. The foreign operatives recognized the signals immediately. The prince was communicating tactical information, suspect position, recommended approach vectors, and coordination timing. Detective Mitchell watched in amazement as the young royal effectively took control of a complex security operation through nothing more than carefully choreographed public gestures. The real threat, the letter writer, had positioned himself near the main entrance and was reaching into his coat. His intention was clear. When the prince emerged for his scheduled departure, he would have a clear shot. But he hadn't counted on being surrounded by 3 highly trained foreign operatives and a dozen British security personnel, all coordinated by a prince who had just demonstrated tactical awareness that surprised everyone. "All units," Commander Whitfield's voice came through all channels. "The prince has just provided tactical coordination. Foreign security team is cleared to assist. In apprehension. Move on my mark." The letter writer, focused entirely on the palace entrance, remained unaware that his carefully planned attack had been discovered and that he was now surrounded by the very people he had hoped to flush out with his threatening messages. Prince Alexander continued his seemingly casual interaction with the crowd, but his gestures had become a sophisticated command structure, directing one of the most complex security operations ever conducted in full view of hundreds of cheering civilians. The moment of truth was approaching rapidly, and everyone involved understood that the next few minutes would determine whether this ended as a successful apprehension or a tragedy broadcast live to the world. The tension in the palace reached its peak as Prince Alexander continued his carefully choreographed communication with the security teams below. Through subtle gestures that appeared to be royal waves, he was directing one of the most complex operations in recent security history. Detective Mitchell had positioned herself within 10 meters of the real threat. The letter writer, a man named David Hartwell, according to the identification they had just received from hotel records, was completely focused on the palace entrance. His right hand gripped something metallic inside his coat, and his breathing had become rapid and shallow. The 3 foreign operatives, whom Mitchell had now identified as Israeli Mossad agents protecting a visiting diplomat's family somewhere in the crowd, had formed a perfect triangle around Hartwell. Their years of training were evident in their seamless coordination. Commander Whitfield's voice came through all security channels. "Intelligence confirms our target, David Hartwell, 46 years old, former military, discharged for psychological reasons 3 years ago, has been sending threatening letters to multiple public figures, not just the royal family." Prince Alexander paused his window performance Processing this new information, Hartwell wasn't just targeting the royal wedding. He was part of a larger pattern of threatening behavior toward prominent figures. This made him even more dangerous and unpredictable. The crowd below had grown to nearly 400 people, all blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding around them. A group of schoolchildren from Manchester had positioned themselves directly behind Hartwell, their teacher helping them hold up a large banner reading, "Congratulations, Prince Alexander and Isabella." "We have civilian complications," Mitchell reported. "School group directly behind target. Any engagement risks civilian casualties." The female Mossad agent, operating under the cover name Sarah Goldman, had moved to within arm's reach of Hartwell. She was pretending to photograph the palace while actually preparing to disarm him if he made any threatening moves. Prince Alexander realized that traditional security protocols wouldn't work in this situation. Too many innocent people, too many variables, and too much risk of collateral damage. He needed a different approach. "Commander, I'm going to do something unconventional," the prince announced. "Sir, please do not deviate from security protocols." "The protocols aren't designed for this scenario," Alexander interrupted. "Trust me." Before anyone could stop him, the prince stepped away from the window and headed directly for the main entrance of the palace. His planned departure time wasn't for another 20 minutes, but he was going to force the situation to a conclusion on his terms. "Sir, you cannot make an unscheduled appearance," Commander Whitfield protested. "I'm not making an appearance," Alexander replied calmly. "I'm ending this." Detective Mitchell watched in horror as the palace doors began to open 15 minutes ahead of schedule. The crowd erupted in excited cheers, but she was focused entirely on Hartwell's reaction. The moment the palace doors opened, Hartwell's demeanor changed completely. His hand tightened on the weapon in his coat. His stance shifted to an aggressive position and his breathing became rapid and focused. "Target is preparing to engage," Mitchell shouted into her microphone. "All units, target is drawing weapon." But Prince Alexander's early appearance had created an opportunity that the security teams hadn't expected. Instead of emerging at the scheduled time when Hartwell was fully prepared, the prince had disrupted the attacker's timeline and mental preparation. The Israeli agent, Sarah Goldman, seized the moment of confusion. As Hartwell focused on the opening palace doors, she stepped forward and pressed a concealed taser against his back. "British police, you're under arrest," she announced in perfect English, despite her foreign origins. Hartwell collapsed immediately, his weapon clattering to the ground. It wasn't a gun as everyone had feared, but a large hunting knife with a serrated edge. The crowd around them thought someone had fainted from excitement at seeing the prince. Several tourists immediately offered help, creating a natural screen that prevented panic while security teams moved in to secure the scene. Prince Alexander emerged from the palace right on schedule, as if nothing unusual had happened. The crowd cheered enthusiastically, cameras flashed, and children waved their flags with unbridled joy. Detective Mitchell coordinated the subtle removal of Hartwell from the scene. To the crowd, it looked like medical personnel helping someone who had been overcome by excitement. The knife was quickly secured, and within 3 minutes the threat had been completely neutralized. "Beautiful work, everyone," the prince said quietly into his microphone as he waved to the crowd. Textbook coordination under impossible circumstances. Commander Whitfield was still processing what had just occurred. "Sir, how did you know that disrupting his timeline would create an opening?" "Military history," Alexander replied, continuing to smile and wave at his delighted subjects. "Every attack plan depends on specific timing and mental preparation. Disrupt either element and you create vulnerability." The Israeli agents melted back into the crowd with professional efficiency. Within minutes, they had vanished completely, leaving no trace of their involvement except for one very grateful British security team. As Prince Alexander's motorcade prepared for departure to the charity event, Detective Mitchell received confirmation that David Hartwell had been planning attacks on multiple public figures over the coming weeks. His arrest had prevented not just today's potential tragedy, but several others. "Sir," she said as the prince prepared to enter his vehicle, "your tactical awareness today was extraordinary. Where did you learn those coordination techniques?" Alexander smiled. Sandhurst Military Academy doesn't just teach ceremonial duties, detective. Sometimes the best way to protect people is to understand how threats actually work. The crowd continued cheering as the royal motorcade departed for the charity event. Children ran alongside the cars for several blocks, their excitement infectious and their joy genuine. But the day's events had revealed something important about the young prince. Beneath the ceremonial duties and public appearances was a sharp, tactical mind and genuine courage under pressure. Detective Mitchell filed her report later that afternoon. Subject demonstrated exceptional leadership and tactical awareness during complex security incident. Recommend additional security consultation role for future high-risk events. The threatening letters to Prince Alexander and Isabella had ended with David Hartwell's arrest, but the incident had revealed capabilities in the young royal that surprised everyone involved. As the motorcade traveled through London toward the charity event, Prince Alexander reflected on the morning's events. Protecting his future subjects wasn't just about accepting security. Sometimes it meant actively participating in ensuring their safety. The Children's Hospital Foundation charity event was a tremendous success, raising more money than any previous royal fundraiser. But for those who knew what had transpired earlier that day, the real success was measured in lives protected and threats neutralized through courage, coordination, and unconventional thinking. 3 days after the incident at Buckingham Palace, Detective Inspector Mitchell sat in a secure briefing room at Scotland Yard, reviewing the evidence collected from David Hartwell's arrest. The case had revealed layers of complexity that went far beyond simple royal threats. Hartwell's apartment had yielded a treasure trove of disturbing evidence: maps of various London landmarks, photographs of public figures taken from concealed positions, and detailed notes about security protocols. At multiple locations, this wasn't just about the royal wedding. It was part of a much larger conspiracy. Detective Mitchell called Chief Inspector Roberts as he entered the briefing room. "We need to discuss the international implications of what happened." The Israeli operatives who had assisted in Hartwell's capture were officially visiting London as part of a diplomatic security assessment. Their presence in the crowd hadn't been coincidental. They had been tracking Hartwell for weeks as part of an international investigation into threats against public figures. "It appears Mr. Hartwell was part of a larger network," Roberts explained, spreading photographs across the conference table. Similar threatening letters have appeared in Germany, France, and Italy over the past 6 months, all targeting high-profile individuals, all using the same distinctive handwriting patterns. Mitchell studied the evidence carefully. The scope of the investigation was expanding rapidly from a simple royal protection case to an international security matter. Meanwhile, Prince Alexander was meeting with Commander Whitfield in a private office at Kensington Palace. The success of their unconventional approach to the security incident had prompted discussions about the prince's future role in protection protocols. "Sir, your tactical contribution was unprecedented," Whitfield said. "The coordination you provided through those window signals prevented what could have been a catastrophic incident." Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "Commander, I've been thinking about what happened. My actions weren't just instinctive. They were based on specific training and knowledge. Perhaps there's a role for active royal participation in security that we haven't fully explored." The conversation was interrupted by a secure phone call from Detective Mitchell. "Your Highness, we need to brief you on some developments in the Hartwell case." An hour later, the prince sat in the secure briefing room at Scotland Yard, studying the evidence of Hartwell's broader conspiracy. The scope of the threat network was staggering. David Hartwell was operating as part of an organized group targeting public figures across Europe, Mitchell explained. "The threatening letters to you were just one component of a much larger operation." The prince examined photographs of similar threatening materials found in other countries. "What was their ultimate objective?" "We're still investigating, but preliminary evidence suggests they were attempting to disrupt major public events and create widespread fear," Chief Inspector Roberts replied. "Your wedding was likely chosen because of its high international profile and media coverage." Prince Alexander felt a chill as he realized how close they had come to disaster, not just for him personally, but for the hundreds of innocent people who had gathered that morning simply to show their support for the monarchy. "What's the status of the other network members?" he asked. "Simultaneous arrests were conducted yesterday morning in Berlin, Paris, and Rome," Mitchell reported. "The international cooperation that began with the Israeli agents in our crowd led to breaking up the entire conspiracy." The prince was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications. His decision to disrupt the attack timeline hadn't just prevented one incident. It had triggered an international law enforcement operation that dismantled a terrorist network. "Detective Mitchell, I want to understand something. When you first identified the Israeli agents as suspicious, what made you realize they were actually protecting someone?" Mitchell smiled. "Your observation skills, actually, sir. When you pointed out that their behavior seemed protective rather than aggressive, it made me reconsider everything. That insight was crucial to understanding the real situation." "Commander," Whitfield leaned forward. "Sir, this raises important questions about security protocols going forward. Your tactical awareness contributed significantly to the operation's success, but it also put you at considerable risk." Prince Alexander stood and walked to the window overlooking the Thames. "Commander, the risk was already there. Hiding from it wouldn't have made it disappear. Sometimes active engagement is the safest course of action." The discussion was interrupted by another development. Isabella Chen, the prince's fiancée, had been contacted by investigators. Her hospital had received similar threatening materials, but they had been dismissed as routine harassment that medical professionals often experience. "Dr. Chen's situation confirms that this network was specifically targeting your upcoming wedding," Roberts explained. "They were attempting to create maximum psychological pressure on both of you." That evening, Prince Alexander and Isabella met privately in his study at Kensington Palace. The day's revelations had shaken both of them, but had also strengthened their resolve. "Alexander, I've been thinking about what you did at the palace," Isabella said. "Your decision to take an active role in stopping the threat was incredibly brave but also incredibly dangerous." The prince took her hand. "Isabella, we can't live our lives in fear of what might happen. The threats were real, but so was our ability to face them intelligently and courageously." She smiled. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say, because I think we should consider making public security awareness part of our royal duties going forward." The idea intrigued Alexander. Traditional royal roles focused on ceremonial functions and charitable work, but perhaps there was room for more active engagement in public safety and security awareness. "What are you thinking?" "Educational programs, security awareness campaigns, international cooperation on threat assessment," Isabella replied. "Turn this experience into something positive that could help protect other people." Detective Mitchell called later that evening with final updates on the case. The international network had been completely dismantled, with arrests in 7 countries, and evidence of planned attacks on over 20 public figures. "Your Highness, the decision you made to disrupt their timeline likely prevented multiple attacks across Europe," she reported. "The network's plans were all coordinated for the same weekend as your wedding." Prince Alexander realized that his moment of tactical thinking had had ramifications far beyond protecting himself and the crowd outside Buckingham Palace. As he prepared for bed that night, Alexander reflected on how quickly situations could change and how important it was to remain alert, engaged, and willing to take appropriate action when circumstances demanded it. The threatening letters had ended, but the experience had taught him that royal duty sometimes required more than ceremonial responsibilities. Sometimes it required courage, quick thinking, and the willingness to act decisively when others' safety was at stake. His wedding to Isabella would proceed as planned, but with a deeper understanding of the complex security challenges facing public figures in the modern world, and with a commitment to use their positions not just for ceremony, but for active contribution to public safety and international cooperation. 6 months after the Buckingham Palace incident, Prince Alexander stood before the United Nations Security Council in New York, addressing world leaders about international cooperation in counterterrorism efforts. The experience with David Hartwell's network had transformed him from a ceremonial royal into an active advocate for global security coordination. Distinguished delegates, he began, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had faced real danger and emerged stronger. The threats we face in the modern world do not respect borders, nationalities, or diplomatic protocols. They require response strategies that are equally borderless and coordinated. In the audience, Detective Inspector Mitchell sat with representatives from 7 different countries whose law enforcement agencies had collaborated in dismantling the Hartwell network. The international cooperation that began with Israeli agents in a London crowd had evolved into a permanent framework for sharing intelligence about transnational threats. The prince continued his address. 6 months ago, my security team and I faced a situation that could have ended in tragedy. Instead, it became a template for how nations can work together to protect not just individual leaders, but the innocent civilians who simply want to participate in public life without fear. Isabella, now Princess Isabella, following their successful wedding 3 months earlier, watched from the diplomatic gallery. The wedding had proceeded without incident, protected by the most comprehensive security operation in royal history, incorporating lessons learned from the Hartwell case. Commander Whitfield, who had been promoted to Director of International Royal Protection Services, was taking notes as the prince outlined specific recommendations for improving cross-border security cooperation. The network we disrupted was planning simultaneous attacks in multiple countries, Alexander explained to the assembly. Their coordination was sophisticated, but our response was fragmented until we learned to share information in real time across jurisdictions. The prince's presentation included video footage from the morning at Buckingham Palace, carefully edited to show how multiple security agencies had coordinated through unconventional communication methods to prevent disaster. Sometimes effective leadership requires abandoning traditional protocols and adapting to unexpected circumstances, he said, as the assembly watched footage of his coded signals to security teams through apparent royal waves. After his UN address, Prince Alexander met privately with representatives from Mossad, Scotland Yard, Interpol, and security agencies from 5 other countries. The meeting focused on establishing permanent protocols for the kind of rapid coordination that had proven so effective in the Hartwell case. Your Highness, said Agent Sarah Goldman, who had officially revealed her identity after the successful operation. Your tactical awareness that morning created opportunities that our standard procedures would have missed. Detective Mitchell nodded in agreement. The prince's ability to read the overall situation and coordinate multiple teams simultaneously was unprecedented. We need to incorporate that kind of adaptive leadership into our training programs. The discussion revealed that the Hartwell network had been more extensive than initially suspected. Evidence recovered over the months following their arrests had uncovered connections to extremist groups in 12 countries, with plans for coordinated attacks designed to destabilize international confidence in public gatherings and diplomatic events. By disrupting their timeline at Buckingham Palace, explained Chief Inspector Roberts, who had flown to New York for the meetings, we forced them to activate communication protocols that allowed us to track and arrest the entire network within 72 hours. Prince Alexander studied the final intelligence reports. The scope of what had been prevented was staggering. Attacks planned for royal weddings, state funerals, international summits, and major sporting events across 3 continents. How many potential victims were we talking about? He asked. Conservative estimate. Over 50,000 people across all planned targets. Goldman replied soberly. That evening, Prince Alexander and Isabella dined privately with several of the security officials who had participated in the operation. The conversation was both celebratory and sobering as they reflected on how close the world had come to multiple tragedies. Alexander, Isabella said, I've been thinking about our role going forward. This experience has shown us that royal duties can extend beyond traditional expectations. Detective Mitchell looked interested. What do you mean, Your Highness? We're in a unique position, Isabella explained. We have access to international leaders, media attention when we need it, and the ability to advocate for causes that might otherwise struggle for attention. Why not use those advantages to promote better security cooperation and threat awareness? Prince Alexander smiled at his wife. She's been developing some interesting ideas about public-private partnerships in security intelligence sharing. The conversation continued late into the evening, with ideas flowing about how to transform their traumatic experience into positive change. Educational programs for recognizing suspicious behavior, international exchange programs for security personnel, and public awareness campaigns about reporting potential threats. Commander Whitfield raised a practical concern. Your Highnesses, these activities would require you to maintain much higher security awareness and personal protection than traditional royal duties. Commander, Alexander replied, after what we've experienced, I don't think any of us can go back to considering security as someone else's responsibility. We're all part of the solution now. 3 days later, back in London, the royal couple announced the establishment of the International Security Cooperation Foundation, dedicated to promoting the kind of cross-border intelligence sharing that had proven so effective in the Hartwell case. Detective Mitchell was offered the position of Director of Intelligence Coordination, a role that would involve working with security agencies worldwide to develop rapid response protocols for transnational threats. The Foundation's first initiative was a training program for security personnel, teaching them to recognize and adapt to unconventional threat scenarios. The curriculum was based directly on lessons learned from the Buckingham Palace incident. We're not trying to turn royals into security operatives, Isabella explained during the Foundation's launch press conference. We're trying to ensure that everyone involved in public safety, from heads of state to ordinary citizens, understands their role in protecting each other. Prince Alexander concluded the press conference with a reflection that surprised many observers. 6 months ago, someone tried to use fear as a weapon against not just my family, but against the idea that people can gather peacefully to celebrate shared values. Today, we're turning that attempted act of terror into a tool for making the world safer for everyone. The Hartwell Network trials concluded 2 months later, with all conspirators receiving lengthy prison sentences. But the lasting impact of the case wasn't the punishment of criminals. It was the transformation of international security cooperation from a theoretical ideal into a practical, effective reality. As Prince Alexander and Isabella settled into their new roles as working royals with an active focus on security issues, they often reflected on that morning at Buckingham Palace, when quick thinking and unconventional courage had prevented tragedy. The hidden cue that the young prince had, sent through his coded signals to security teams, had aimed not just weapons at a suspect, but had aimed an entire international network of dedicated professionals at protecting innocent people worldwide. What had begun as a simple royal appearance had evolved into a new model for how nations could work together to face common threats. And at the center of it all was a young royal couple who had learned that sometimes the best way to serve your people is to actively participate in keeping them safe.